Hi, I'm Mike Glenn, and I am the president of the Engaged Church Network, and we're glad that you joined us for our podcast today. Joining us today is a friend of mine, a guy by the name of Bill Pfaender. And first of all, let me explain this has nothing to do with the guitar. In fact, it's not even spelled the same way.
Too bad.
Yeah, it's kind of disappointing, I know, so I just wanted to get that out. Bill grew up in Florida, educated in Florida, started in the restaurant business, then joined the Marines, and retired after 20 years as a major. So, Major, thank you for your service.
Absolutely.
And grateful for you and all of those men and women who serve in our armed forces stateside and around the world. And after the retirement from the Marine Corps, started to work with Chick-fil-A and now runs a couple of local Chick-fil-A's not too far from this office that we're very, very glad that we have the inside at Chick-fil-A. And we do take advantage of that from time to time. But here's why I wanted to talk to Bill today. Bill has been part of two institutions, the Marine Corps and Chick-fil-A, that both pride themselves on the development of leadership and are known outside of their own entities as being a place where leaders are developed. One of the core challenges of local pastors is identifying and training leaders in their local congregation. Too many pastors think they have to do it themselves. They burn out. They end up doing poorly at something they're not any good at doing. And they think that identifying that leader and training that leader would take way too much time and all that. But you and I know it ends up saving time.
True. Yep.
On the other side. So imagine that we're sitting here talking with a group of pastors. What would you want to tell them about the development of leaders and the importance of that?
Good question. I would say, number one, that it doesn't matter if you're a pastor, doesn't matter if you're in the Marine Corps, it really doesn't matter what you're trying to lead or what you're trying to influence. Leadership across the board is pretty much the same no matter where you are. Mm-hmm. And I don't think pastors should put the pressure on themselves thinking they're unique and they can learn from a lot of different folks.
Right.
About the pure essence of leadership, because it really is basically the same no matter where you are. Mm-hmm. I know when I was a young lieutenant, just out of the basic school in the Marine Corps, trying to figure out what leadership was all about and what leading and being led was all about. It was very interesting that most of us were unwilling to listen to the folks that had been around for a while that knew what they were doing. Mm-hmm. We thought we were the end all and the savior of whatever, that we were pretty full of ourselves coming out as a young Marine.
The Marine Corps is lucky to have you, huh?
And we can make all the decisions. We knew everything. I think the first thing we need to admit when we get into a position, a pastorate, where you're in charge of a church, or if you're in business in charge of something, is the fact that you don't know everything. Humility, I guess, is probably one of the biggest things that, quite frankly, I had to learn in the early days, was understanding that I didn't know everything. That some of these enlisted guys that had been doing this for 15, 20 years knew a lot more than I did. And maybe it was my decision, but I had to listen to a lot of people and weigh a lot of information and try to make a decision the best I could. I think it starts there, humility. You have to know that you're not always the guy that knows everything, no matter what you're responsible for. So I guess it starts there.
Yeah.
And in my experience of being around the world a few times and being in a lot of churches, I can't even count how many churches we actually attended. Some for a long time, some for maybe just a few months as we passed through on duty stations. I didn't find that quality in a lot of preachers.
Right.
Humility. They thought it was their church, it was their way of thinking, it was their plan, it was their ideas, and if you didn't like it...
Yeah, the old God told me, I'm telling you.
It's just too bad. That's the way it is. And probably some of the most disappointing experiences I've had in churches is because pastors wouldn't listen to their elders, wouldn't
Right.
listen to their deacons, wouldn't listen to whatever that command structure is in a church, whatever you might have. They didn't listen. And in some cases, they failed.
Right.
The church failed. Very disappointing and very heartbreaking in certain circumstances. But probably the most enjoyable experiences I've had is when the pastors and the leadership of the church did listen to the congregation, did listen to people that knew what they were talking about. And it was one big happy family, and we all worked together to make things work.
And everybody had their own.
I mean, somebody has to be the decision maker, and
Right.
maybe somebody has to be the final judgment, but they listened. So I guess that's where I would start, with humility.
One of the turning points in my own ministry was when I had a couple of friends come to me and go, "We can take this off of you.
True.
You know, you're not any good at it. You don't like it. We can take this off of you, and you can do what you love to do, which was the preaching and the teaching, the study of Scripture, and all of that. The administration of the church, I didn't enjoy. I can do it, but
it's a time. It takes your time.
it takes your time. It takes your energy. And there are people who thrive off of doing that. I told people, I said, the turning point for me was when I would see my CPAs and my accountants look at a spreadsheet with all the dots and everything's beautiful and in line, and they would have tears in their eyes. This was such a work of art to them.
And you're going, man, I don't want any part of this.
I don't need any of this. Just tell me yes or no. But how does a pastor, and since most of our friends watching will be pastors of local churches, how do they start this transition from it being all about them to identifying and developing those people who would be able to share leadership in the congregation? What are you looking for?
I would say that, again, they need to be willing to look. They need to be willing to understand that your gift may not be across the board in all things. And you mentioned
it may not. It is not.
It's not. It's definitely not. And you hope that most pastors' real gift is preaching the word, connecting with people, doing that part, and ministering to people. It's not much different than my time with Chick-fil-A. It's not all of our gift to do this administration stuff, and even the management part of the thing. You weren't hired to be a manager, and a pastor really wasn't hired to be a manager of a church.
Right.
He was there hired to be a preacher, to deal with the people, much like a Chick-fil-A operator. Most of everything that goes into management of our restaurants is done at the corporate level, and they give it to us. It's a very simple process. They hired me to be the people person, hire people, train people, raise people up, and let them help run the business. And I think pastors in particular need to be willing to let go of those management functions, of those, so to speak, deacon responsibilities, maybe even elder responsibilities, and focus on what they've been hired to do. And that's to lead people, teach people, preach the word, minister to people. But it's all about the people. One of the favorite sayings we have at Chick-fil-A is, we're not really in the food business, we're in the people business.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you're trying to create an experience for people. The food has to be good, has to be a clean restaurant, has to be nice people, but you're trying to create an experience.
Right.
And I think that's something that sometimes churches go a little too far trying to create that experience.
Right.
And you get into more of a showcase, but the experience has to be there. People have to understand what they're getting into and how they're treated. And sometimes only the pastor can do that.
Right. Now, one of the interesting things that happened for me, sure it happens for you, is sometimes our most fun and sometimes our best success is when the people are around us are successful.
Absolutely.
When you see the young kid who showed up at 15 or 16, got their first job, and now they're ready to take on a leadership role with the team, and they do it, and they thrive, and the team thrives.
You're right. Absolutely.
That's the best part of the day, is watching their success.
Absolutely.
And I do think a lot of times pastors do forget that we are in the people business, in that it is our privilege to walk along someone to help them discover and thrive who they are in Christ, and then blossom in into all that.
And it gives them the opportunity.
Right.
Sometimes we squelch that opportunity. We think we can do it better ourselves, and like you said before, you can't do everything correctly.
No.
You can't do everything well. You can do a few things well, things you're gifted at doing, and you got to be willing to give the rest away.
Right.
It's that willingness to give it away, and have that ability to trust people.
Well, and trust that God knew what he was doing when he pulled that group of people together.
It's true.
So there's going to be different gifts among the body.
True.
So that the body working together glorifies God in a way that they can't, that no one person can by themselves. So tell me, what are those markers of a leader? If you're looking for someone, you're looking at a group of people, what are those markers that you're looking for?
I mentioned the first one, humility. People that usually like to stick out and be recognized and look at me kind of person don't always thrive, because it's constantly about them. So I'm always looking for maybe the guy that doesn't talk as much, maybe the guy or the girl that doesn't stand out as much, but is willing to work. Someone that shows initiative without being asked. Somebody that is maybe even in the background doing stuff that most people don't even know it's getting done, but they're willing to do it without the recognition most of the time that goes with it. People that do a job, if you've asked them to do something, maybe they go the extra mile. Maybe it falls in there with initiative, but Chick-fil-A is big on that, going the extra mile.
Right.
The verse in Matthew that talks about carrying that pack an extra
One
mile.
more time, yeah.
It's fun to watch a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old kid. When you ask them to do something, do they do the bare minimum? Or do they go that one step further, maybe even take it a little bit further and clean something different, since they're on a roll doing something? So you keep your eyes out for those kind of people that, number one, don't need the recognition. Number two, take the initiative to go that extra mile. And then look for those people that are doing things without even being asked.
Right.
They're just doing things. And I think that kind of initiative and that kind of quality of work stands out, that they can probably take on something a little bit more responsibility.
Yeah. One of the things that I've learned to look for is look for who the church sees as leaders.
And it becomes pretty obvious sometimes.
A lot of times who the church defers to, who the team already defers to.
And it becomes pretty obvious sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes those in the trenches know who the leader is a lot faster than we do.
And when we need to embrace that.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes leaders get a little paranoid about that, that maybe that general manager in my situation, that general manager or that team member is getting more attention maybe than I am. And I think that can cause, again, the humbleness of your heart has to come through, that you're willing to give away that recognition, that those people should get the recognition. They're doing most of the work.
Here's what I found out. One, it is a kick in the teeth when we started the campuses and people started going, hey, Mike, we like you a lot, we love you, but man, we love. And you could say it was a totally different way that they said it
This guy.
about our campus pastor. And this was the guy that I chose, I trained, I did into stuff, and now he's meeting a need in a way that I couldn't, and never would. I'm not put together that way. Not like he is.
Nor do you have the time.
Yeah, and so, but I began to be able to embrace that was my role.
That's right.
that was my calling in that situation, to develop another successful, gifted pastor.
Yep.
And sometimes it's not so much the ability to be recognized by anybody else as much as it is just knowing in yourself.
Yeah, and it's not only your job to do that.
Yeah,
it's your responsibility.
Right.
That is your responsibility to raise up folks that can lead the flock, because you can't do it all yourself.
No.
And that was probably the hardest lesson I had to learn as an operator with Chick-fil-A. Back in the early days when I had a mall store, you had 18 employees.
Yeah.
I could do it all. At least me and my wife could do it all. We didn't have to ask for much help, didn't have to get anybody else involved. I made all the decisions, da-da-da-da-da. But as you moved into a standalone store and you got 150 employees, it became pretty obvious pretty quick.
And 100 of them working in the drive-thru.
Well, that's true.
Those cars
you can't do it all, so you have to start looking for the people you're talking about to help you do this thing. And then when you get 2 stores, it's impossible.
Right.
And if you don't look at your leaders and let them do their job and trust them, empower them, follow up with them, true. And that's part of leadership too, is to follow up and give feedback.
And
but
if you don't, you end up burning out.
True.
You end up burning out your stores.
And you will.
Yeah.
Trust me, you will.
You'll burn out.
You will burn out so fast that.
And you'll burn up your church too.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are some of the things that we need to be mindful of? Boy, here's one thing you don't want to do. I tell people wisdom means I screwed up before you did. That's all wisdom is. So what are those 2 or 3 key mistakes in identifying and training other leaders that you would want us to be mindful of?
Number 1 is micromanagement. Mm-hmm. You've heard that probably 100 times, and I'm sure everybody's heard that. But it's probably the hardest thing not to do, is to stick your nose back. When you've trained somebody, you've empowered somebody, you've trusted them to do a job, and then you stick your nose back into it.
Right.
And you say, that's not the way I'd have done it, or I don't think that's the right way to do it, or you can't second guess the people you've entrusted to do it. They may not do it the same way you did it. They may not lead the same way you lead. They may not make decisions the same way you make decisions.
When you stick your nose back in, you take the power back from them.
But you totally usurp their authority.
That's right.
You can't delegate responsibility, but you can give them the authority to make those decisions and to do that job, and then they take that responsibility. And it's fun to watch.
Oh, isn't it?
It's really fun to watch when the light bulb goes off and the people realize, and they have to realize that they are empowered. They have to realize that they can do the job, that you've empowered them. And if you don't make it clear to them, that's probably the second point is it has to be very clear. Clear and concise instructions, clear and concise, responsibilities, even in writing, if you can do that.
Yeah. Just because you said it doesn't mean you communicated it.
Right. So when it comes time for your semi-annual review or your annual review, and you got it in writing, and you've laid out the foundation of what you want from people, you got something to deal with. And what about this? What about this? What about this? And most people are very receptive to that if they know exactly what the expectations are. It's when that gray area shows up and they don't really understand that they got, did you really mean what you said?
Right.
Am I really empowered to make that decision? Do you want me to make that decision? Then people start waffling.
Right.
And then they refuse to make a decision because they might get in trouble or something. Right. And I guess that's probably the third thing is when someone does mess up. Like you just said, we've all messed up, and we're all going to mess up again. You hope that nobody suffers too much from those mistakes, but and you hope you don't make those same mistakes again. But we're human. We're going to make errors. We're going to make a lack of judgment. We're going to do something wrong. In our cases, it may be as simple as a pickle or something on a sandwich. But in the Marine Corps, it was you make a mistake and bad things happen to people. And you hope you don't make those, but you got to make a decision. Your people have got to know, you've got to know that you got to make a decision. That's what leaders do.
Right.
Leaders decide. The buck stops with them. And raising up a new leader, that's the scariest thing in the world, for a new leader to make a decision. not maybe, not what if, not, maybe tomorrow. Information's presented to you and make a decision. Right, wrong, indifferent, whatever. You made a decision.
Well, both of us remember that moment when we realized that we were now adults and our dads weren't going to come help us.
That's true.
No.
Really?
That's right, yeah.
And that was pretty scary as you walk out of the basic school in the Marine Corps and you're now a lieutenant in charge of all these people who have been in the Marine Corps for 15, 20 years, and you're the college graduate that's making a decision.
Right. And saluting you and all that.
And you have to make a decision that might cost somebody their life. And who are you? Kind of thing. So if you're not willing to listen and learn pretty fast, you're in big trouble.
Okay. Let's ramp up for our friends here. I love what we've been talking about. One, the principles of leadership are universal.
True.
Right.
Absolutely.
Same in the church, same in the Marine Corps, same in Chick-fil-A.
Absolutely.
The essence of being a good leader and all of those would transfer. A couple of keys that you've mentioned: humility, realizing you can't do it all, weren't called to do it all, weren't designed to do it all. The ability to listen and identify those people who can do the things that you're not good at, and developing the leadership skills in them to do that.
Right.
You make it sound so easy.
And then empower them to do it.
Right.
Give it away.
Release them to do it. Right.
And let them do it. And don't micromanage. Follow up when needs to be. Give feedback when. And feedback is probably one of the most important parts of leadership. People have got to know how they're doing.
Right.
There's a guy named Patrick Lencioni wrote a book on the three signs of a miserable job. Number one was nobody even knows I'm here, being anonymous.
Right.
You have to make that person part of the team. Number two is irrelevance. Those people have to know that they're doing something that's of value to the system, to a church, to a business, to whatever it is. They have to know that they're doing something that's important. And the third thing is they've got to understand what the measurement tool is.
Right.
They've got to know if they're doing a good job. They've got to know if what they did was right, wrong, made a difference in the organization, whatever. And if even one of those pieces is not there, you're going to have an unhappy team member, employee, deacon, elder.
And that's your responsibility as leader.
It's your responsibility to make sure that person is cared for. They know why they're there. They know it's important that they're there, and they know that they're doing a great job. Or maybe they're not doing a great job, but they got to know. But not knowing is very, very difficult for most people.
Right.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
And it will create.
Well, it's that affirmation that you get in all kind of feedback systems. The traffic flow and, the green light, red light, you're doing it right. We have all kind, and then you get in your job, the most important part of your life in that moment, and you don't know. You're confused.
Right.
The last thing that I want to say to you pastors is you're afraid that if you give away authority, if you give away the job, that somehow you're going to lose something. Here's been my experience. When our church members engaged in their ministry, other people would come back to the church and say, hey, I met so-and-so. I was in the hospital. Your deacons came to visit me. They would brag on that deacon. They would brag on the ministry person. And then they would say, this is a great church. It always came back to me. I got back so much more than whatever I perceived I had given away. And that's what we dream for you. This is my friend Bill Pfaender. He has been joining us on this podcast, and I'm glad you joined us too. I'm Mike Glenn, and this is the Engaged Church Network.